Hello, everyone. This is the 219th episode of Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles and the Soccer Nostalgia blog. For this episode, I welcome back Spanish author and historian Mr. Sergio Vilariño Ferreiro as we discuss the matches of the Spanish national team during the 1985-86 season. Mr. Villarreño is the author of México 50 años de fútbol en color. Welcome back, Sergio.
Hello, Shahan. Thanks for having me.
Thank
Always a
you.
pleasure to come back.
Thank you. So let's go back in time. Last time we left off at the end of the 1984-85 season. That had been somewhat of a difficult season after the highs of the Euro 84. Just to remind others, there was the heavy loss against Wales and Scotland in the World Cup qualifiers. So what was the state of the Spanish national team as we come to the fall of 1985 after a season that, though it may have been difficult, there had been the introduction of the young hope Emilio Butragueño?
Yeah, it's true that on the road to Mexico, certain expectations were created because the team had largely moved away from La Furia. Players like Butragueño, as you said, Michel, Gordillo, Maceda, Señor played a more technical, attractive style of football. There was some excitement about this shift, although not from everyone, not by a long shot. And even today, a large part of the Spanish fan base feels nostalgic for the days of La Furia. But my impression is that the euphoria following the Euro 1894 faded during the qualifying campaign, as we explained in the last podcast. Doubts about the quality and commitment of the players in the national team returned to normal. We had the end of the international career for international players, important players such as Arconada or Santillana, although nobody knew it at that time. And as we said in our last podcast, we talked about the situation of instability within the federation with the former president Pablo Porta already being replaced by José Luis Roca, thanks to a decree law that in September 84 prevented Porta from continuing as the top dog of Spanish football, and that kind of calmed the waters. But there was still some noise in the background regarding the national team.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the significant change in the tail end of the previous season was the discarding of captain and inspirational goalkeeper Luis Arconada. That, as you said, we still did not know at the
Yeah.
time that that would be the last of him with the national team, and he was to be replaced with Andoni Zubizarreta. And also Carlos Santillana, another veteran from the 70s of Real Madrid, also played for Spain for the last time. And again, at the time, I don't think we knew about Santillana, that
No.
that would be the last of him. So how were these changes felt? I guess maybe not at the time, but as the year wore on.
I mean, as I already said, no one knew that by this point, Arconada and Santillana, two veteran and highly respected members of the team, had already played their last match for the Spanish national side. For many, Arconada was still considered the best goalkeeper in the country. Santillana was a valuable asset, even coming off the bench, thanks to his experience, to his extraordinary aerial ability. Arconada's successor, Zubizarreta, was still young, but he was already a two-time La Liga champion with Athletic Bilbao. While in the case of Santillana, it was very clear that Muñoz was going to use a player with more mobility, such as Butragueño, Rincon, or Eloy. It's true that once it became clear that Muñoz wasn't calling them up anymore, there started to be some noise in the media and among the fans, something that is quite typical when it comes to the Spanish national team. It's often said that in Spain there are 40 million national team coaches. And of course, club loyalty was and still is deeply rooted among supporters who want to see players from their own teams represented in the national squad. And in the case of Santillana, it was even worse because Santillana was included in the long squad for Mexico, although eventually he wasn't called up.
A few weeks before Spain's final qualifier against Iceland, Wales and Scotland played in a match that ended in a tie. It was a match where the Scottish manager, Jock Stein, would have a heart attack and lost his life. Therefore, at this point, Spain knew that a win was sufficient to win the group. Nevertheless, they would make a hard work of it against Iceland. What was the atmosphere in the 2 weeks prior to this match? Was it felt that it was a formality for Spain?
I mean, the feeling was similar to that of the famous match against Malta, although the task was, I think, easier. But because at this moment, Spain was in control of their own destiny after the result in between Wales and the Scottish. Wales seemed to be the clear favorite after defeating Scotland in Glasgow and thrashing Spain in Wrexham, but the draw between the two British teams opened the door for Spain. And once again, as it happened in the first game in Reykjavik that we talked about in the last podcast, the Icelandic took the lead and Spain had to fight for a desperate comeback. The match was really tough, and when Gordillo scored the winning goal after Rincon had equalized it, euphoria erupted among the players and the crowd. It had been a hard-fought battle, but Spain was going to Mexico. It was also a very important game and goal for Gordillo, who had been criticized during the qualifiers because of his mediocre performance. He was one of the most talented Spanish players, and there were certain expectations of him that were not met during the last season. So for El Gordo, it was a way to confirm his status and his place in the final squad for Mexico.
Yeah, and we should mention that in the off-season, Gordillo and Antonio Maceda had joined Real Madrid
Yeah, they were
in the
part of
Spanish spur.
La Quinta de los Machos with Hugo Sanchez.
Indeed, yeah. So this match was on September 25th at Sevilla at the Estadio Benito Villamarin. For Spain, we have the following lineup. Zubizarreta of Athletic Bilbao in goal. Gerardo of Barcelona. This would be his ninth and final cap for Spain. His first cap had been in 1981. Captain of the team, Camacho of Real Madrid. Maceda of Real Madrid. Goicoechea, Athletic Bilbao. Rafael Gordillo of Real Madrid. He'd be replaced by Julio Alberto of Barcelona in the 88th minute. Hipólito Rincon of Betis. He'd be replaced by Marcos Alonso of Barcelona in the 46th minute. And for Marcos Alonso, this was his 22nd and final cap. His first cap had been in 1981. Then you have Victor of Barcelona, Emilio Butragueño of Real Madrid, Gallego of Real Madrid, and Rojo of Barcelona. And for Rojo, this was his fourth and final cap for Spain, all of them in 1985. He had been beneficiary of Barcelona's title-winning season of 84-85,
Yeah.
but he would not gain any more caps after this. During this match, like you said, Iceland would take the lead through Gudmundur Thormjörnsson in the 36th minute, but in the 44th minute, there was a cross on the left side. Rincon would stop a turn and shot to tie the match. And early in the second half, in the 51st minute, a clearance was headed back to the left, and Gordillo volleyed in the winner.
I think we already talked about this game, but for five players, it was a very important one. For Zubizarreta, it was kind of the confirmation that he was a true alternative for Arconada, which was bad news for Arconada's fans. And then the four players that you name, Gerardo, who played recently for the national team and appeared to have been in contention for Mexico, and he never played again. Rincon, who played as a starter and then disappeared from the national team. He was called up for Mexico, but Muñoz kind of lost faith in him. Marcos, who was one of the clear candidates to play in Mexico, especially the left flank, and he was injured. He never recovered for the national team, really. And Rojo, who was basically a one-season wonder. He played pretty well during that 85 season that Barcelona won the league, but then he was never in contention for Mexico after a disappointing 1986 season.
So, virtually 2 months before most nations, Spain were already in the preparation phase. Do you think in the end that helped Spain to settle on a side as well as to experiment a little?
Yeah, probably having those extra 2 months of preparation should always be considered an advantage. But it's also true, and I'm sure our listeners will remember that in our previous talk, we mentioned how almost all the friendly matches played by this Spain under Muñoz were kind of rather pointless because the coach already had a very clear idea of which players he trusted. Only an injury or a serious dip in form could push someone out of the team. And moreover, Munoz was never afraid to hand a debut to players in high-stakes matches or under difficult circumstances. He was one of those who believed that if a player was truly of international caliber, he should prove it when it mattered, not in friendlies with no pressure at all.
Spain's first preparatory friendly was on November 20th, 1985 at Zaragoza against Austria. For this match that would end as a scoreless tie, we have the following lineup. Zubizarreta in goal, making his international debut, Tomas Renones of Atletico Madrid, Maceda, Goicoechea, Camacho, captain of the team. He'd be replaced by Julio Alberto in the 46th minute. Victor, he'd be replaced by Juan Senior of Zaragoza in the 46th minute. Making his international debut, Michel of Real Madrid, the second La Quinta del Buitre player to be selected for Spain.
Yeah.
Gordillo, he'd be replaced by Francisco of Sevilla in the 46th minute. Making his international debut, Quique Setien of Atletico Madrid. Hipólito Rincon, he'd be replaced by international debutant Eloy Olaya of Sporting Gijón in the 66th minute, and Emilio Butragueño. So you have a number of international debutants, and we should mention that Klaus Lindenberger, Austrian goalkeeper, he saved Butragueño's penalty kick in a 20th minute. So Spain could have won this match. But again, it was an experimental match. This is one of those matches. I don't think I have any footage from this match.
Yeah, I didn't find anything. I read the chronicle on El País, and apparently it was like nothing special, like pretty much all the friendlies that Munoz played. And actually for the fans, this was also quite clear because there were barely 10,000 people at La Romareda in Zaragoza. Spain played with the majority of its regular starters 4-4-2 formation, where perhaps the biggest novelty, as you said, was the call-up for Poli Rincon after his long absence due to an injury, and also the presence of Tomas Reñones from Atletico Madrid on the right flank of the defense, who would end up starting in Mexico, and also the inclusion of Quique Setien alongside Victor Munoz in the center of the midfield. Setien was a technically gifted, elegant player, somewhat languid, but capable of bringing creativity to the team. And he complemented Victor Munoz's physical strength and work rate very well. Tomas, on his part, was an old school marker, very tough, very physical, similar to Camacho. He's going to be an important member of the team for the next 4 or 5 years.
Like we mentioned earlier, Michel was the second of the La Quinta del Buitre players to be selected. What was his status at this point, and was it self-evident that he would become the Real Madrid legend that he became?
Michel was already established in Real Madrid's first team alongside Butragueño and Sanchís. Martín Vázquez moved in and out of the lineup, and Pardeza never really managed to secure a regular place in this senior squad. Michel was probably the most complete of all the members of La Quinta del Buitre. He was a right-side midfielder who was able to play also as a wing-back, also in the middle of the park, and even as a libero, as we saw in specific games of Real Madrid. His right foot was excellent, especially for crossing. He was really creative, and as a true Madrileño, he had this somewhat cocky demeanor, and people adore him. I mean, especially young Madridistas, and he was probably the one who was soccer mad. He was totally obsessed with the game. He was always watching games. He was always talking about it, right? I don't know if we can say that we knew he was going to become a legend, but it was really obvious that he was a special player who would be important for the next 10 years. He was the most regular performance of the whole Quinta during their 10 to 12 tenure in the first team. And at the national team level, his presence on the right flank added the flair this team was lacking. He was really, really good.
In addition, Eloy and Tomas Renones made their debuts against Austria, two players who would be a mainstay of the team into Mexico and beyond. Did Munoz's experimentations work better this particular season?
I think at least he was able to find useful players for his style of play. In other conversations, we talked about how the majority of debutants play 1, 2, 3 games and disappeared from the team. In this case, Eloy, Tomas, later on, Julio Salinas, Chendo, even Calderé, Setien, were relevant players for the national team at a certain point. So I think maybe these friendlies or these chances that he gave to these players were more useful than before.
The next friendly is on December 18th, 1985, against Bulgaria at Valencia. For this match, we have the following lineup: Zubizarreta, Tomas Renones, Goicoechea, Julio Alberto, Maceda. He'd be replaced by Camacho in the 46th minute. Michel. He'd be replaced by Senior in the 64th minute. Victor, captaining the team. Ramon Caldere of Barcelona. Francisco. Quique Setien. He'd be replaced by Manuel Sarabia of Athletic Bilbao in the 72nd minute. Emilio Butragueño, and he'd be replaced by Eloy in the 46th minute. So Spain would win 2-0. They would take the lead in the 14th minute when Michel scored from an indirect free kick.
Mhm.
In the 67th minute, Victor's cross from the right side was headed in by Caldere at the far post.
This game against Bulgaria in front of around 50,000 people in Valencia. So this is what we were expecting from the crowd, at least, right? We had an interesting mix of veterans from the 84 campaign and this new wave of players who were making their debuts in preparation for Mexico. Spain played with a 4-5-1, which was not common by Muñoz, right? Leaving Butragueño alone on the attack, which wasn't ever a great idea. And the same happened when Eloy came in for him. In the middle of the park, Muñoz relied on Michel and Setien to be the creative force of the team, and Victor Muñoz was the anchor. Francisco, on the other side, he was the short, the secure passer, and Caldere was sort of a box-to-box midfielder. He was not very technical, but along with the other two, was able to cover a lot of ground. Spain actually played quite well in this game, and Caldere sealed the deal with the second goal, deep in the second half after Michel opened the score after 15 minutes of play, as you said. It was also a good occasion to see Manu Sarabia back on the fold because he had some difficulties at Athletic because of his bad relationship with Javier Clemente. They still hate each other nowadays because they know how to hold a grudge. And by the way, we need to note that this Bulgarian team had some notable absentees such as Nasko Sirakov or Bobby Mihailov, the goalkeeper, because they
Oh,
were some
yes,
of the
yes.
players who were involved in the massive fight of the Bulgarian Cup final between Levski and CSKA. The government suspended quite a few of the footballers involved and even disbanded the clubs, although later on they just were renamed. Levski became Vitosha and CSKA became Sredets
Sradets, yeah.
for some years.
Yeah. Spain started the new year 1986 with a friendly on January 22nd at Las Palmas against the Soviet Union. For this match, we have the following lineup: Zubizarreta, Tomas Renones. He'd be replaced by international debutant Chendo of Real Madrid in the 46th minute. Goicoechea, Julio Alberto, Maceda, Michel, Butragueño. He'd be replaced by Eloy in the 77th minute. Victor, captain of the team. Caldere, Francisco. He'd be replaced by Quique Setien in the 46th minute. This was Quique Setien's third and final cap for Spain. And of course, his first cap was the couple matches before that. So after three consecutive matches, yeah, that was his last international appearance. Then you have international debutant Julio Salinas of Athletic Bilbao, and he'd be replaced by a senior in the 74th minute. The international debutant Salinas would score also in his very first match for Spain. So in the 24th minute, after a free kick on the left side, the ball was pushed out by the Soviet defense, and Francisco's shot reached Salinas in the box, who shot and scored. 5 minutes before the end, from the middle, Caldere passed to Eloy on the left, who went on and scored Spain's second goal. And Spain won 2-0. Salinas and Chendo made their debuts in this match. Now, Chendo, while he was not a La Quinta del Buitre player, he was a further reflection of Real Madrid's dominance at home and now in Europe at this point. While Salinas would be in the team into the next decade, despite not always being a regular in his clubs, especially at Barcelona. Again, two more successful experiments by Munoz. What was the takeaway from this match and these two?
Against the USSR, Munoz returned to the 4-4-2 formation, bringing Salinas to partner Butragueño up front, the classic big man, small man combination. And in this match, which was played in Las Palmas, if I'm not mistaken, the national team performed quite well and left a very positive impression on the fans. The Soviets, we have to say, were going through a period of doubts and crisis that would eventually lead to the dismissal of Eduard Malofiev and the return of Valery Lovanovsky to the bench, a change that would spark the revolution of his scientific football, with Dynamo Kiev contributing as many as 13 players to the team that would travel to Mexico and impress during the first round of the World Cup. On the Spanish side, it's worth highlighting that both Salinas and Eloy proved their worth as partners or alternatives to Butragueño, virtually securing their tickets to Mexico. Chendo also made his debut, and at that time he was already an undisputed starter for Real Madrid, who were on their way to winning the league for the first time in 5 years. The press focused heavily on Munoz's experiments, and he tried to find a new midfield combination that wouldn't rely too much on the inconsistent Gallego and Gordillo. And in this match, Calderé played on the left, though not too wide, because he was supposed to be leaving room for Julio Alberto's overlapping runs, who by then had established himself as the starting left back, although we will see that he will play midfield later on. The football in the second half actually was more attractive. The Soviets made several substitutions, trying to give their team a more attacking character, and in doing so, they neglected some of their marking and made the mistake of leaving too much space between midfield and defense. And in that open area appeared Setien, who seemed to be taking the place of an uninspired Francisco, and produced some very good moments for about half an hour. And thanks to that, along with Butragueño's flashes and the team's generally solid performance, Spain improved significantly and at times even managed to truly entertain the crowd. As you said, both debutants, Salinas and Chendo, performed well enough to see their names written in Munoz's pre-selection for Mexico, although Chendo won't play as much as was expected, and both will be important players for the national team in the next years.
The following month, on February 19th, Spain faced Belgium at Elche, who they would meet in the World Cup as well. For this match, we have the following lineup: Zubizarreta, Tomas Renones, Goicoechea, Maceda, Camacho, captain of the team, Michel, he'd be replaced by Gallego in the 77th minute, Francisco, Victor, Julio Alberto, he'd be replaced by Carrasco of Barcelona in the 77th minute, Butragueño, and Julio Salinas. Spain would win this match 3-0. In the third minute, it was either a cross or a corner kick. It's very hard to tell from the footage. So this cross/corner kick from the left side was knocked in by Butragueño.
Yes, it was a corner. Yeah, the Chronicle from El País says that it was a corner.
In the 41st minute, Salinas received the pass on the left side, and he cut in and shot past Belgian goalkeeper Jackie Monaron. In the 73rd minute, Michel's corner kick from the right side was headed in by Maceda. And I believe that would be his last goal for Spain.
Yeah. In this game, Munoz tried once again his favorite 4-4-2, but this time with Julio Alberto as a left midfielder. And we already see a pattern. We know that left flank of the team was giving him some headache, and we will see him just changing players for the next games, just trying to kind of solve that problem. Spain was superior to the Belgians, although that was a team that was not at full strength, but I don't think anybody could have imagined what was the future holding for both teams in less than 6 months. It was a very good game by Butragueño, who looked sharp and in good shape for the World Cup, and another solid performance by Salinas. And another piece of good news for Munoz was Antonio Maceda, who looked like his best version and was obviously the cornerstone of Spanish defense for the World Cup.
Spain's final friendly ahead of the World Cup was on March 26th against Poland at Cadiz. For this match, we have the following lineup: Zubizarreta, Tomas Renones, Gallego, Goicoechea, he'd be replaced by Carrasco in the 73rd minute, Camacho, captain of the team, Michel, he'd be replaced by Senor in the 46th minute, Francisco, Caldere, Julio Alberto, he'd be replaced by Gordillo in the 46th minute. Butragueño, he'd be replaced by Rincon in the 78th minute, and Julio Salinas. Spain would win this match 3-0 as well. In the 20th minute, Michel scored with a long range shot from outside of the box, and his shot was deflected by Butragueño along the way. In the 30th minute, Butragueño's cross from the right was pushed out by Polish goalkeeper Josef Mlinarczyk,
Narcic.
and Caldere shot in the loose ball. And in the 48th minute, Caldere lobbed the cross or a high ball in the box, and Salinas headed it in.
Yeah, more of the same. The Spanish way, it's Spain's way, right? In the game against the Polish in Cadiz, against 3-0 victory. Really good performance in general by the national team. We have to highlight the presence of Ricardo Gallego once again in the middle of the park for Muñoz's team, this time replacing Victor Muñoz in the starting lineup. And that combination with Francisco lacked speed and physical strength, but both were excellent passers of the ball. And the Polish didn't present much of a fight that day in Cadiz. So in that context, Gallego and Francisco work well together, but in more competitive matches, they will be an issue.
Now, for these last two final friendlies, Munoz did not experiment as he had settled on a core of players. Were the press and the public satisfied with the team at this point?
Yeah, I think everybody knew who was going to go to Mexico, although certain omissions, such as Santillana, who made the long squad, raised some eyebrows. The Arconada affair was kind of in the past, and that was good for Munoz, mainly because he knew that if Zubizarreta made some important mistake, he was going to be the main culprit and not the young Basque goalkeeper. Anyway, with Munoz and the press, we always had that extra something that made things spicy, and we will see some examples of it when we talk about the final 22 who went to Mexico. Overall, I think the last results in the friendlies against good teams created an atmosphere of expectations for the World Cup. And even Munoz said that Spain could beat anybody. So based on that, we could be champions.
Well, Spain were ready for the World Cup after this impressive run in the preparation friendlies. The solid defense and also the impressive performances by the clubs in the European competitions. We have Barcelona and Atletico Madrid reaching the finals of a Champions Cup and a Cup Winners' Cup, and Real Madrid winning the UEFA Cup for the second consecutive year. So, as a result, was there optimism for the World Cup?
Yeah, I think so. The performances in that first semester of 1986 had been good against good opposition, and there was some optimism around the national team. And on top of that, the draw was benign, with only Brazil as a top team to beat. It's true that there were still some bad memories from the last World Cup, and Northern Ireland was one of the worst of them. And Algeria performed really well in Spain 4 years before, so they could be a dangerous team. But overall, the feeling was that Spain should go through at least as second in the group. Obviously, some of this optimism was affected as soon as the final squad was announced, and the press and certain players reacted badly to some of Munoz's choices. Firstly, the Spanish Federation provided the media with a list of 29 players, like the famous long squad from the list who, so there are seven. The idea was like, and I'm quoting, to work the possible selections for a few days now, right? And there are seven footballers from the list who were not in the final squad, who were Bullo, Gerardo, Marcos Marina, Mino, Sanchez, and Sarabia. It was not ruled out that one of these players, with the exception of Sanchez, who was injured, could have been called up if there was any withdrawal among the 22 selected players.
So let's look at the 22 selected players for this World Cup. For the goalkeepers, at number 1, we have Zubizarreta. Number 13, Urruticochea of Barcelona.
Mhm.
And number 22, Ablanedo of Sporting Gijón. Defenders, number 2, Tomas Renones. Number 3, Camacho, captain of a team. Number 4, Maceda. Number 6, Gordillo. Number 8, Goicochea. Number 11, Julio Alberto. And number 15, Chendo. Midfielders, number 5, we have Victor. Number 7, Senior. Number 12, Kike Setien. Number 14, Gallego. Number 17, Francisco. Number 18, Caldere. Number 21, Michel. Strikers. Number 9, Butragueño. Number 10, Carrasco. Number 16, Rincon. Number 19, Salinas. And number 20, Eloy. So, like you said, no surprises. All the players who had played in the preparation friendlies.
Yeah, it was more about the absentees or some of the, some picky selections. One of the surprises was the call-up of Chendo in the place of the injured Sanchez. Munoz dismissed the idea that Chendo's selection was a surprise, noting that he had used him in the preparation match against Soviet Union in Las Palmas, only to not call him up afterward. I'm quoting Munoz here, right? It is necessary to have two players for the right side of the defense, and I have chosen Tomas and Chendo. The Real Madrid player is accustomed to international matchups in Europe with his club. That's what he's playing, right? Munoz stated that the list of 22 players was put together so that each position had two players. He also pointed out that he did not decide to replace Sanchez with another center back because Camacho or Gallego could play there if Maceda or Goicoechea were unavailable. The national team coach also cited more or less recent injuries to justify the absences of certain players such as Sanchez or Marcos. But the big fuss came when he was asked about Bullo's absence, and Munoz replied, "He's not on the list, just as Juanito, Gainza, or Epi are not on it." And this was obviously a very sarcastic comment because he named Juanito, a player who was past his prime, but with some admirers among the journalists who every now and then ask him to be called up. And the other two players named by Munoz were Gainza and Epi, who played in the 50s. So it was obviously that there was some bad blood between Munoz and Bullo, who was dropped after his performance in that famous game against Malta and never came back in contention. And eventually they will have another big clash before Euro 88, where Bullo would be a total pain in the neck during the preparation and the tournament, where he didn't play at all. The coach stated that the core of the team was established from day one, which we obviously knew. And the same can be said as the system of play. Everyone working together, all for one and one for all, like the Musketeers. So that's it. And from the list, just highlight the presence of Ablanedo, right? The young Sporting de Gijón goalkeeper. He was not very tall, but he was really agile and had good position in the same mold as Arconada. And funnily enough, Bullo. Two members of the 84 gang who Munoz called up were Rincon and Carrasco, but they didn't play. And that created a really bad atmosphere among certain players, led by these two and followed by Quique Setién, who had some reasons to be frustrated after performing so well in the previous friendlies.
As you said, Spain were in a group in Mexico with Brazil, Northern Ireland, and Algeria. Brazil and Spain would have been the favorites to advance for this group. And the first match was between these two, Brazil and Spain, at Guadalajara. So this is the Brazil of Edinho, Junior, Falcao, who would play in the last 10 minutes. I believe Zico was injured, did not play this match.
Yeah, Zico didn't.
Yeah. And of course, Careca, whom everyone, I believe Zico was injured, did not play this match.
Yeah, Zico didn't play.
Yeah. And of course, Careca, whom everyone will know as one of the best players of this World Cup. For this match, we have the following lineup. And this match played on June 1st. Zubizarreta, Tomas Renones, Camacho, captain of the team, Maceda, playing in his 36th and final cap for Spain. His first cap had been in 1981. Goicoechea, Julio Alberto, Victor, Francisco. He'd be replaced by Senior in the 82nd minute, Michel, Salinas, and Butragueño. There was a controversial moment in this match in the 54th minute when Michel's shot, it hit the bar and the ball had clearly crossed the line per television replays, but the goal was ruled out. We're talking, this is the pre-VAR era.
Yeah.
And then 2 minutes later, I think Edinho scored a goal that was also ruled out. Eventually, Brazil would score in the 62nd minute. Careca's shot struck the crossbar, and Socrates, who looked to be suspiciously offside
Offside.
headed in the winner. So maybe a scoreless tie would have been a fairer result for this match, but Brazil won 1-0. But yeah, I think the Michel's non-goal is often referenced from this match.
Yeah. This is perhaps one of the most famous games in the history of the Spanish national team. Certainly one of the most remembered before 2008. I mean, Spain played well, solid manner against one of the great favorites for the final title, which was obviously a Brazilian team that had captivated Spain in the 1982 World Cup and still had many of their stars from 4 years later. Although, as you said, some were past their prime in age and form. They also feature new figures like Careca, like Muller, like Branco, for
Branco,
example,
oh yeah,
right? Yeah.
Alemão, yeah.
Alemão. The game was played under terrible conditions, 33 degrees. In Guadalajara, the majority of the spectators supported Brazil because of those Mexico 70 memories, right? Spain played with their usual 4-4-2 with Julio Alberto as the left midfielder and Salinas partnering Butragueño up front. Tomás and Camacho were the fullbacks, and Goicoechea and Maceda, the only two center backs in the squad, played a solid match. Both teams, I think, approached the game cautiously because they were aware that a defeat could complicate things in the group. As you said, the key moment came when a shot by Mitchell from outside the box in the 52nd minute, I think, rebounded off the crossbar, landed nearly half a meter inside Carlos's goal. But the Australian referee, Christopher Bambridge, who is one of the most famous referees in Spain till this day, decided to not award it as a goal. The photo with the ball well inside Brazil's goal became one of the most iconic in Spanish football. And I remember I was really young, and for almost a decade, there was barely a bar in the entire country that didn't have that poster with the legend, the goal they stole from us. It was like so obvious. I think, and as you said, things got even worse because given the circumstances of the Brazilian goal, which was scored from a very doubtful position by Socrates. In general, I believe the feelings after the match were not bad, but the issue always remained that Spain wasn't able to beat almost any top team in international tournaments, and sometimes not even teams that were at their peak form. So some of these claims were going to be disproven in this World Cup, but others, unfortunately, would remain the same for few more years.
Ahead of Spain's next match, Antonio Maceda would be injured, and that would not only end his career with Spain, but virtually his career with Real Madrid, as he never really recovered from this injury. What can you say about his international career with Spain?
Yeah, an injury to Macedo or Goicoechea was one of everyone's greatest fears. Muñoz had only brought two pure center backs to Mexico, and although Gallego or Camacho could play there, neither of them were at the level of the starters, even though they brought other valuable characteristics to the team. Gallego could
Nor
play.
his goal scoring proficiency of Maceda.
Not at all. I mean, Gallego could play the ball out cleanly from the back, but was very slow. Camacho was a great marker, very brave, but didn't have as much quality. And his reposition into center back meant Julio Alberto had to play as fullback, opening up a space on the left side of the midfield. You have to play Gordillo, Calderé, etc. And in Maceda's case, the injury, as you said, effectively ended his career. He had been a tremendously important signing for Real Madrid, one of the three tough guys, the three machos, right, along with Hugo Sanchez and Gordillo, and his level as a center back or sweeper was among the best in the world at that moment. He was tall, he was elegant, he had excellent ball control. He was a decisive player for his ability to score goals in important moments. He was a big game player, as he had demonstrated, for example, in the 84 European Championship, right? His absence would completely disrupt the national team strategy and leave Real Madrid searching for a replacement for years. I mean, the club would only find a player of Maceda's caliber with the consolidation of Fernando Hierro as a center back, and that was 5-6 years after, right?
Spain's next match was against Northern Ireland. And of course, as you mentioned earlier, there was the bitter memory from the 1982 World Cup when they lost
Yeah.
1-0. But these were different circumstances. So this match against Northern Ireland was on June 7th at Guadalajara, but at a different stadium. This was at Estadio Tres de Marzo. For this match, we have the following lineup: Zubizarreta, Tomas Renones, Camacho, captain of the team, Goicoechea, Gordillo, he'd be replaced by Caldera in the 53rd minute, Victor, Francisco, Gallego, Michel, Salinas, he'd be replaced by Senior in the 78th minute, and Butragueño. Butragueño would score the fastest goal of this World Cup in the first minute. From the middle, Michel sent Butragueño through on the left, and he shot past Pat Jennings.
Mhm.
In the 18th minute, Spain would double the lead. On the left side, Butragueño passed across to Salinas, who struck Spain's second goal. Northern Ireland would pull a goal back in the 46th minute when Zubizarreta's missed kick was headed back by Gallego towards Zubizarreta, who slipped, and Colin Clark headed in Northern Ireland's goal. But Spain held on and won this match.
This match against Northern Ireland, as we mentioned earlier, that brought back many ghosts from '82 when the Northern Irish defeated Spain in Valencia and almost knocked them out of the World Cup. Actually, kind of knocked them out because that sent Spain to the group with England and Germany. It was very difficult, right? Billy Bingham's team was gritty side, but they were full of veteran players past their prime with no replacement of the same quality. But anyway, the match was really tough, and it's remembered by, at least in Spain, for the tremendous gash on Camacho's forehead after a collision with an opponent. Obviously, the national team captain, who is always an example of courage, he finished the game, but the scar remained forever. And even today, the enormous cut on his forehead is one of his most distinctive facial features. Spain dominated the game from the start. As you said, Butragueño scored in the first minute. That gave the team confidence. Salinas completed the job, although Northern Ireland later narrowed the gap in a goal that showed that Zubizarreta was not Arconada. But at least this put the national team in an excellent position to qualify for the round of 16, because with a draw, probably the deal was sealed.
After this match, there was the banned substance controversy with Caldere. Can you discuss this?
Yeah, Ramon Caldera tested positive in a doping control at the World Cup. After this game, the substance detected was ephedrine, but FIFA did not sanction him because it was proven that it had been prescribed to him to treat gastroenteritis and not to improve his performance. Although his performance after this would make everybody think twice, because after following this incident, Caldera played in the next match and scored 2 goals, and he was not a goal scorer. So
So this last match was against Algeria on June 12th at Monterrey. For this match, we have the following lineup: Zubizarreta, Tomas Renones, Camacho, captain of the team, Goicoechea, Victor, Gallego, Francisco, Caldere, Michel, he'd be replaced by Senior in the 63rd minute, Salinas, Butragueño, and he'd be replaced by Eloy in the 46th minute. In the 15th minute, Salinas crossed from the right side and Caldere struck in Spain's first goal.
Mhm.
We go into the second half in the 68th minute. From the middle of the field, Eloy was sent through, and as he entered the box, he passed across to the left for Caldere to score into an empty net. Just 2 minutes later, Gallego or Francisco, I have different sources that say either or. Gallego or Francisco's cross from the right side was struck in by Eloy, and Spain won 3-0.
Yeah, Spain only needed a draw, as we said before, against Algeria to advance to the knockout stage. And Muñoz kept the core of the team almost intact, only bringing in Calderé to play on the left side of the midfield. The gamble paid off brilliantly because the Barcelona players scored 2 goals and decided the match. Gallego played as a center back along Goicoechea to allow a clean build up from the back, and he even moved into the midfield when the play allowed it. This was a necessary move because Algeria was able to effectively control Michel, who was Spain's greatest creative talent at that moment, thanks to a double mark by Mansouri and Jamel Zidane. And we will see this again, later in the quarterfinals against the Belgians did something similar to this. We also saw minutes for Senor, who played well, and also for Eloy, allowing Butragueño to rest after halftime. Camacho, despite his incident against Northern Ireland, played and perfectly marked out the dangerous Rabah Madjer, who was Algeria's most prominent attacker. There was some fear at the end of the match as Mitchell had suffered a slight injury, but it wouldn't ultimately prevent him from facing the Danes in Querétaro, which was the next game.
So this next match, the second round, was against Denmark, who had been impressive in this World Cup, defeating West Germany, Scotland, and Uruguay. It's the Danish dynamite of Michael Laudrup, Preben Elker, Soren Lerby, Morten Olsen. I could go on and on with all the familiar names.
Unbelievable team.
Yes. And with that iconic kit that everyone remembers. So this match was on June 18th at Querétaro. For this match, we have the following lineup: Zubizarreta, Tomas Renones, Camacho, the captain, Goicoechea, Julio Alberto, Victor, Gallego, Michel. He'd be replaced by Francisco in the 83rd minute. Caldere, Salinas. He'd be replaced by Eloy in the 46th minute, and Butragueño. Denmark would take the lead. In the 33rd minute, Thomas Renones fouled Klaus Berggren in the box, and Jesper Olsen would score from a penalty kick. Now, just before halftime, in the 43rd minute, Jesper Olsen makes an erroneous pass. It was actually a pass across from the left side to his goalkeeper, and that was picked up by Butragueño, who scored Spain's first goal. And of course, Jesper Olsen's error would lead to, in the Danish lexicon, to the term of riktig Jesper Olsen, which means, I guess, a real life Jesper Olsen. If someone does an error, they refer to that. In the second half, Spain would go on a rout. In the 56th minute, Victor's corner kick from the right side was headed across by Camacho and headed in by Butragueño at the far post. In the 68th minute, Soren Busk fouled Butragueño in the box. Andoni Goicoechea scored from a penalty kick. In the 80th minute, Eloy's cross from the right side was knocked in by Butragueño, and he has a hat trick now. And in the 88th minute, Morten Olsen fouled Butragueño in the box, and this time Butragueño himself would score from the penalty kick. Spain would win 5-1, and Butragueño had scored 4 goals in this match. This was the first time since Eusebio in the 1966 World Cup against North Korea that a player had scored 4 goals in a match. And Spain won 5-1. It was all about Butragueño. He became a global star in a way after this match. His legend is somewhat set from this match. And it's strange to think that in those days, one could become a global star after a match in a World Cup. But that's how it was back then. What was the impact of this match on his career?
Lots to talk about the game, and then we're talking about Butragueño, right? I think the game against Denmark is one of the most famous in the history of Spanish football, right? Half the country stayed up late to watch the game against Denmark. Denmark side that was the greatest,
good Denmark side,
the greatest sensation of the World Cup at the moment. Spain knew them well from their Euro '84 semifinals. The Danes were heavy favorites, and it seems that Spain were just perfect victim for Sepp Piontek's team to continue steamrolling opponents on their way to the final stages of the competition. However, the match eventually passed into national folklore due to the numerous people from Madrid who, just taking advantage of the tremendous summer heat and Butragueño's 4 goals, they went to bathe in the Cibeles fountain, right, during the night, and they were chanting "Oa, oa, oa, el buitre a la Moncloa," which was basically calling for Butragueño to be invested as the president of the government. I mean, the Danes were more talented and they were in better form. I think it was their own anxiety that betrayed them. I mean, according to the book Danish Dynamite, it seems that players were starting to get tired of the World Cup tension and living in isolation, something that was apparently beginning to affect them mentally. And it didn't look that way during the first minutes of the match, at least not until they took the lead through that penalty half an hour into the game. But from that point on, and starting with Jesper Olsen's mistake on a back pass to his goalkeeper last hook, which Butragueño intercepted, capitalized on to score his first goal. And after that, the days seemed to melt under the criminal sun that scorched the pitch of La Corregidora Stadium, right? Once again, there were minor changes in Muñoz's 4-4-2, right? With Camacho playing as center back with Goicoechea this time and Julio Alberto as left back. Calderé, after his brace against the Algerians, started as left midfielder, and Gallego and Victor Muñoz played central, Mitchell on the right? Salinas was disappointing and left the field at halftime once the Spanish coach realized Eloy's speed could be more dangerous against a Danish defensive line that was playing really high up in the pitch to try to apply some pressure and regain momentum for the team. And that high line was Denmark's Achilles heel. Butragueño, once he scored the first goal, he was all over the panicking Danish defenders. He scored the second after a good header inside the box, provoked a penalty for Goicoechea to score, added the third goal after the pass from Eloy and completed the poker with a second penalty. That afternoon in Querétaro confirmed him as a global star, and he went into the quarterfinals of the World Cup as the top scorer of the World Cup, tied with Gary Lineker.
Another narrative to this match is that Spain would be their jinx team, like they would be their bête noire.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
they had defeated them in 84, now 86, 88 Euros, also 94 World Cup qualifiers. So this
Yeah.
tradition would continue with Spain always in the way of Denmark.
Yeah. I mean, it was becoming a trend, and they were as aware of it as we were. And just answering the question about Butragueño becoming a global star, I mean, actually, his ascension to global stardom was gradual. I mean, his famous debut against Cadiz, right, made him a national sensation. Then his magnificent performance against Anderlecht in the UEFA Cup made him like a really well known at the European level. And it was this victory against the Danes that turned him into a recognized figure worldwide. That was also, I think it was also part of the charm of pre-internet football, right? Great talents were always discovered at the World Cup, at the European Championship, international club competitions. There were many talents that ordinary people didn't have access to for various reasons, right? And this match represents his burst into global stardom, like the highest peak of his popularity. In Spain, he became not just a sporting but social icon. He became the image of a country who was struggling to move away from the shadow of the dictatorship and closer to modern European democracies. And on top of that, this coincided with the country's entry into the European Economic Community. I mean, this game would also become the standard for his own performances, which in many cases would mean an extra weight of pressure, both from the media and obviously in sporting terms. And in reality, especially with the national team, Butragueño would never shine as brightly as he did in Mexico, particularly in that game against Denmark. I think that's the issue with him. Like, he was so brilliant in that World Cup that everything that he was able to do after, it was like considered like, oh, this is not enough. We've seen you
Right.
play better.
In a way, yeah, because we sometimes forget, because he did score 5 goals in this World Cup, that he was not a goal scorer at the
Yeah.
level of a Hugo Sanchez, someone who would score like 20, 30 goals a season. I think he
Yeah.
was Pichichi only one season, if I'm not mistaken,
Just,
like 90,
yeah, only
91
one.
season. Yeah.
19, yeah, he scored only 19 goals, so that's a very low mark
Right.
for a top scorer, really.
Yeah. But for Spain, he would be the standard bearer into the end of the decade.
Yeah.
So, Spain were in the quarterfinals and they would face the surprising Belgian side who had eliminated the Soviet Union. This is a Belgian side with Jean-Marie Pfaff in goal, other familiar faces, Eric Gerets, Enzo Schifo, Jan Kulemans, among others, managed by the legendary Gitis. So, for this match on June 22nd at Puebla, we have the following lineup: Zubizarreta, Tomas Renones. He'd be replaced by Senor in the 46th minute. Camacho, captain of the team. Chendo making his first appearance and only appearance of the World Cup,
Hmm.
Julio Alberto, Victor, Gallego, Michel, Caldere, Salinas. He'd replaced by Eloy in the 63rd minute and Butragueño. Belgium would take the lead in the 35th minute when Frank Vercautren's cross from the left side was headed in by Koulemans.
Yeah.
Spain would tie the match 5 minutes remaining. Victor's free kick from the right side was struck by Senior, shot from a long range shot from outside the box, and the match was tied. So the match would go into extra time, and a penalty kick shootout would be needed to determine the winner. Belgium would score on all their tries, but for Spain, Eloy would miss his spot kick. This was Spain's second kick.
Yeah.
And Belgium would win 5-4 on a penalty kick shootout and advance to the semifinals. And Spain's World Cup was finished.
Yeah. One of the biggest problems for Spain in preparation for these quarterfinals against Belgium was that Goicoechea received his second booking of the tournament against Denmark. And this way, Spain was without center backs for this game. Camacho and Gallego played together in the center of the defense. As Muñoz had planned in that interview before the tournament, Chendo, surprisingly, was chosen to act as left back. Although there were moments where Chendo will appear at center back, Camacho will move to left back. They exchange positions quite often in the first half. Due to Belgium's right flank to be deemed as the most dangerous side of the Belgian. That was the part where, at the side where Gerets and Berkouteren and sometimes Schifo appeared, right? Julio Alberto remained as left midfielder with Calderé moved to the center alongside Victor, right? The game was pretty dramatic because once Belgium took the lead, everybody knew it was going to be very difficult to survive. The Belgians were able to cut the rhythm of play quite often with fouls, protests, etc. They were really good at that, especially Mr. Gerets and Mr. Faf. Belgium's goal, by the way, was a header by Sulemans inside or Camacho taking care of him, and that was one of the key elements Spain lacked without Maceda and Goico. That zonal marking was not at 100% with obviously two player not natural center backs. At halftime, Muñoz introduced Senor for Tomás Reñones. He moved Chendo to his natural right back position, Julio Alberto to left back, and allowed Senor to play alongside Victor in the middle, with Calderé occupying the left flank. This improved Spain's game. They controlled the majority of the second half, and eventually they got that deserved equalizer via, as you said, the thunderous Senor shot from outside the box with 5 minutes to play. And it looked like the momentum was on Spain's side for the extra time, but the second half goal never arrived. And going into penalties, Spain was dead. Zubizarreta was a non-factor in these situations, and Eloy's mistake condemned the national team. And it was quite the anticlimax after the euphoria of the Denmark game. I think Spain could have given Argentina a run for their money in the semis, but sadly it was time to pack the bags and wait 4 years for a redemption that actually never arrived.
On balance, what was the takeaway regarding Spain's performances? Was there a belief that perhaps Belgium were there for the taking?
I think that after what happened in that friendly this same year, I think there was a little bit of that feeling, and that we got past a super strong team in Denmark, and the Belgians should be an easier matchup. And on top of that, we have to say that Guite's team got through the group stage with some lackluster performances, but kind of woke up against the impressive USSR in the round of 16. I mean, to be honest, these two surprising results, Spain beating Denmark, Belgium beating Soviet Union, didn't allow us to enjoy what could have been one of the matches of the tournament. That Denmark USSR, were two teams that played what was probably the best international game of the year 1985 in the qualifiers, right? Yeah, that defeat against Belgium was certainly a huge blow for Spain at that moment. And now that we have some hindsight, we see that was the missing chance, like a missed chance.
Young players like Butragueño, Michel, and Eloy were now the mainstays of a national team. Was there belief that this team would improve further by the 1988 Euros?
Yeah, the group who went to Mexico was a mix of veterans from Euro 84 and young players like Butragueño, Michel Chendo, Julio Salinas, Eloy, etc. Right? There was quality, and the feeling left by the World Cup was positive. The sense of stagnation comes, I think, in the following cycle. I mean, there was a lot of excitement for Euro 88 with La Quinta del Buitre at its peak, but the team didn't perform well, and that's when the national team stopped evolving, which became evident at Italia 90. I like to compare this defeat against Belgium with that of PSV Eindhoven in 1988 for Real Madrid and La Quinta. I mean, the feeling was that they could have gone farther or even all the way, but since we had a young, talented core, there was hope for the future. The best was yet to come, right? But never came, to be honest. I mean, that was the peak performance for this generation and a real missed opportunity, as I said before.
As stated earlier, Butragueño became a global star. What other players do you think stood out, and which ones did not live up to the expectations?
I mean, Butragueño was the man of the moment. I think we talked about or enough about him, right? Mitchell confirmed what everybody expected from him. I mean, young, talented, with character. He was about to become the best and most regular Spanish player in the next 4 or 5 years, right? Calderé was the biggest surprise of the tournament for Spain. I mean, he was supposed to be the last midfielder in the rotation and finish the World Cup as a starter. And he would be an important player for the next 2 years up to the Euro 88. Julio Alberto also confirmed his status, and in what was probably his last season as an elite player, it didn't matter where he played. His motor was superior to almost everyone else on the field. That was very, very important, especially in the conditions of Mexico, right? On the other side, I mean, we have several players who disappointed the fans. I mean, Zubizarreta, he basically did nothing. Gordillo, as we said before, he was one of the most talented Spanish player, a key member of the 84 squad, and even decisive in the qualifiers, but he didn't play at all. I mean, for a footballer who was considered a star, he had a great season with Real Madrid, and a year later, he was going to be referred by Ruth Gullit as a potential Ballon d'Or. I mean, that was not good enough, right? Rincon, Carrasco were more or less in the same situation as Gordillo, right? Good, important players in the Euros cycle, but they lost track for the World Cup, and their behavior during the tournament was pretty bad, adding problems for the team. For Rincon, it was the end of the road, but Carrasco will make a comeback for Euro 88 drastically. He was considered not physical enough for the type of football Muñoz wanted to play in the next cycle. He was slow, and although he was a good, safe passer of the ball, other players took his spot. Roberto, right? We talked about him during the Euros. He will come his spot. Roberto, for example, right? We talked about him during the Euros. He will come back during the qualifiers for the Euros and the World Cup also. And lastly, well, I think we have players like Eloy or Salinas who confirmed his value and were going to be around the national team orbit for quite some time, especially Salinas.
So, in closing, was this one of the best Spanish World Cup performances until winning it in 2010?
Yeah, along with 2002 and 1994. I mean, 2002 was special because of the way we were eliminated in pretty weird circumstances by South Korea, right? I think it was a team that, looking at the tournament's development, could have reached the final because that German team was pretty mediocre. In 1994, the team was really solid and had bad luck against Italy, but once again, it was a typical Spanish performance of not being able to beat the top teams in a tournament, right? Mexico was special because of the new generation of players, the fact that people had to stay up late to watch the games, the great match against Denmark, the explosion of El Buitre, playing against Brazil. It was definitely a very special tournament, and Spanish fans kind of love that team, the tournament. I think it has a place in our hearts.
With that, I would like to thank you for your participation in this interview and this series.
Yeah, my pleasure, of
Yeah.
course.
And all our respective contact information is listed on the blog and podcast uploads. So, Sergio, thank you once again and hope to continue these discussions on football history.
Thank you, Shahan. My pleasure. Bye bye.
Thank you.